Okay, so this is the graphTweets part of our networks project. So we've done the intro to networks part, and now we're going to do the graphTweets part. And this actually should be one of our shorter assignments. Basically, what we're doing is we're combining two methods that we've already used. One is rtweet, which we use in the API project. And then the other one is our networks using, iGraph and then VisNetwork to create the diagrams, and we're combining those. And it actually makes a lot of sense in a class like this that's focused on kind of internet research to use a social network like Twitter to create and analyze some networks. We can look at links between people and based on their Twitter usage. So I'm going to go ahead and load these packages in. I should say when I first loaded this, I think if you might come up with a warning message that says some of these packages are not installed. Mine kind of came up at the top here, and then just click install. And I thought I had everything loaded, but I think it was rtweet that wasn't that needed to be installed first. In addition, because we're using this rtweet, you may need to go through this process again of going to your Twitter app developer.twitter.com, I think is what it was, and then entering in your app name and then your passwords here, and then running that. To check it, what you might do is do this search tweets command and just see if that runs. And if it says authentication error or something like that, then you're going to need to go back here and if you need to remind yourself how to do all this, you can go back to the rtweet exercise in the APIs project. But I would say, so for me, I know that it works because I just tried it, and and I should say I actually did have to go back and copy and paste all this stuff to get it working first. But then once I ran that just a few minutes ago, and so I know that this is working. And if it works for you automatically, I would just go ahead and delete all this stuff. I just don't run this. I think if you run it with these kind of null values in the passwords, it might. I'm not 100% sure, but it might screw it up if you do that. So just go ahead and delete that whole chunk if this line works for you. So I just ran this and collected these tweets. Let me go ahead and just take a look at this data file just to remind ourselves what our tweet gives us. So we've got all these tweets, and we've got the names of the people who tweeted them. Kayla Ruru and Hannah741, etc. And there's a couple of ways that people might be linked, like in a network, on Twitter. So we've got the person's screen name and then their text. But like notice, for example, that this text has another person. It actually has a couple people in there. In fact, a lot of these, it looks like almost all of these tweets have some other person mentioned. And so that's called a mention, and that creates a link between this Kim and this Paulo Rib whatever person. And so we could do a network, put a line between those two individuals. So that would be one way. It's called using mentions. What we're going to do that a little bit later. What we're going to do first is retweets. So let's see if I can find, where is that? Well, it's in there somewhere. I guess maybe at the end here. So they have, if it was a retweet, and you can see most of them aren't, but if it was, then you'll see it'll tell you what the text was, what the, where does it tell you? In here somewhere it tells you what the retweet screen name was, I think. So you have the screen name of the person, and then you have the person who you retweeted. There, let's see, that's reply to screen name. I don't know, I'm not seeing it right now, but anyway, it'll tell you who they retweeted, and that would be a link as well between two people. It could be a reply, it could be followers. There's a lot of different ways that people could be linked on social networks like on Twitter. And so basically what we're going to do is create a network out of these links between people. Um, and so I wanted to show you actually any way that you can get tweets using the search tweets function in RTweet. You can create a network from them. I wanted to show you one way that we didn't use before, which was to define a location. And so this is actually the latitude and longitude of Billings. And then I set, you can see it says 25 miles, so I set kind of within 25 miles of that particular location, like kind of center of Billings, and then got 2,000 tweets. This won't work on everybody. You have to have your location services turned on, but if you do, then it'll find people here in Billings that are tweeting, and then that's the data set here. So the other thing, the only real new package is this graphTweets package, and what that will do is it'll help us take this set of Twitter data and create basically an iGraph object, and we can also get the list of nodes and the list of links between the nodes, and we could actually do it ourselves without too much difficulty. Basically you've got the screen name, and then you've got, in here you've got the retweet or the quote screen name, or the mention screen name is one we'll do later, and we could create our links data from that. But it's a little bit tedious to do it, and what this graphTweets package does is it kind of just simplifies that process of turning the Twitter data into network data. So what we do here, I actually put I could have kind of separated this, but I kind of decided to put it all in one big chunk here. So let me kind of break it down a little bit what we'll be doing. And I have some kind of explanations here, but remember, with our network data, we have a couple of different objects. So we have the network object itself, which we're going to create, and then we're going to have a list of nodes and a list of edges in two separate files, in two separate data frames. And so we have these three kind of objects that that we're going to be creating here with this chunk, and then using to do some network analysis. And so this graphTweets function, these GT, which I think stands for get edges maybe, and get graph are functions from that graphTweets package. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these Billings tweets that we just collected up here with search tweets, and then we're going to send it to this get edges. We're going to feed it a couple of the columns, so the screen name of the person who tweeted, the retweet screen name, which I couldn't find up there in the data, but it was in there somewhere in one of the columns, and then the text of the tweet itself will also keep. And then we're going to do this get graph. So what it does is it's this package, basically takes tweets. It's designed specifically for our tweet, and it'll take those tweets and it'll create a network, like basically an iGraph network from them for us. Then what we're going to do is we're going to extract the nodes from that network. So there's that Billings retweet network that we create up here, and we have to do another command to get the nodes, and we'll name it BL retweet nodes. And so when you use this to do your own analyses, basically what you'll need to do is just change the names of these things. So depending on what tweets you got, or who what you want to name it, you'll call it something other than BL for Billings. Then I kind of just decided to combine a lot of these steps into this one big chunk. So if you remember from our network assignment, we did a lot of this mutate of different columns. So mutate creates new columns, and when we want to put the diagram, when we want the diagram to have the names visible, we need to create a label, and we create a title. And so basically I'm just doing some of these steps that we would normally do anyway, but I'm putting it all into one big chunk here. We got the degree, so remember that's like the number of connections that that an individual has, and that will determine the size. We set value to degree, so it when we create the diagram, it will change the node size, like the size of the circle, based on how many connections it has. Then this next step, it's creating the edges. So we're kind of extracting the edges from the network, that data frame. So we have a list of from and to, and then this is putting the title, setting the title of the edge to the text. So when we hover the cursor over the line, it'll show us what the tweet was that the person retweeted. And then this, I went ahead and actually, even in the same chunk, just created the diagram itself. And the only real difference, I don't think we had used arrows before because all of our networks were undirected, but this is actually going to be a directed network because it's going to be one person, retweeting another person. And so we want the arrow to point to the person that was retweeted. And so that's what that does. So let's just go ahead and run that. I know it's a big chunk, but hopefully that will do everything, that at least all the initial steps that we need to do. And so there's it's kind of interesting looking, but there's our network diagram of the tweets around Billings, and I should say the retweets. And you can see like some of them, I don't know who this Chuck Tingle is, but people seem to like to retweet him a lot. Share if you remember Davy Swimmer on The Friend. No, I don't remember that. But it looks like, oh, and there's another one. Maybe people are retweeting a whole bunch of different things. Love is real. Okay. Incredible. Enjoy new sexless tingler. Okay, no, thank you. So anyway, you get the idea. I don't know who this person is, but apparently people like to retweet him a lot. Here's another one that people like to retweet. Okay, the hoop focus, that sounds like it's probably a sports, like basketball focus. So if we hover over Chicago native Anna Miller is one of the best shooting guards. Yeah, so it's people are retweeting this person who, maybe it's even a reporter or whatever, who reports on basketball, I guess. Yeah. So you get the idea. And these are all the people who did the retweeting, and they all retweeted this one person's tweets. Now, you can see it kind of makes it an interesting, it reminds me of like a Pac-Man or something. Or is that the Turkish flag that I'm thinking of that has like a crescent moon and then the star? Anyway, you can see that there's a couple of people that are retweeted a lot. Here's another one. I think that's the weather in Billings. NWS, National Weather Service. Yeah, and you can see it's we're having bad weather, so people are retweeting about the weather. But a lot of these, like this was just one person, Bob or Bo Denelson or whatever, Bodie Nelson retweeted this, and Shavers, okay, so it's just this one firm believer that Netflix should offer student discounts. Okay, so the thing about this, and I wanted to show you this, but I actually don't think this is the right way to create one of these networks because it's so disconnected. Like you can see a couple of them are very popular, but most of these are just individuals retweeting each other because they're just people in Billings and they don't necessarily know each other, and so it's a very disconnected network. And so I'm going to show you a way in a moment here to get, I think, a better, more tight network. Okay, but let's do a couple of the statistics. So it says the following will get the number of vertices or nodes in the network. So we just run that. And so there were 370 people, retweeters or people who were retweeted. And now it says find the number of edges. And so let's create our chunk, start with the network. and then pipe that into, and now, so v count counts vertices or nodes, and edges, to count the number of edges, it's e count. So let's do that. And you can see there were, wow, there were actually more nodes even than links, which is really unusual. So there are 330 links. Oh, and I wanted to mention something in case you didn't see it. You know, you've got the arrows there, right? So that means that this person retweeted this person. And I think in the previous diagrams we didn't have these arrows. And that's called a directed network. Okay, and now it says, starting with BL retweet edges, it says select only the from, the person who retweeted another, the to, and the text of the tweet, and create a data table of the retweets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this select command. I'm going to select from, to, and text. And so, by the way, so how do I know that? So if we look in what this graphTweets does for us, those are the that's the network, these are the edges. Is it, you know, it looks just like our you know, our terrorist network where we have a from and a to, you know. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm going to look at the from and the to and then the text of the tweet itself and just create a data table. So to create that data table, I need to do this data table, and let's just keep it simple, so I won't do any of the options for data table. And so there you have it. So, and we can, you know, search or scroll through or whatever and see, you know, who that, I wonder what language that is. But we can see who someone retweeted and what the specific tweet was. Okay, okay. Okay, so now it says get the density of the network. So I'm going to start with the network rather than the edges or the nodes. So BL retweet network, and then I'm going to get the command is edge density, edge underscore density. And now, so I say here the number will likely be very small because it's a very disconnected network, and you can see it's 0.002. And remember, it's like a percentage of the total links possible. So it's you know, actual links divided by possible links. And you can see, you know, most people are very disconnected here. And this is why I think this is a little bit of a problematic way to, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not the best network. It's not really a group of people that know each other. And so I think a better way to use this, let me move this over a little bit, is to start with a specific list of users in mind that you know are linked. And so what I decided to do, I went to the Billings Gazette Twitter page, and they kind of have lists of their reporters. And so what I did is I don't think this is all of them, but I took a bunch of the reporters and just kind of copied and pasted their Twitter names. And what is that, about 3, 4, 5, 6, about 10 of them. And then what you can do is put that into an object I call BG reporters. You have to use this, make sure you use the C command, and then put them in parentheses, and then put their names in quotes. And then you can use this, instead of search tweets, we're going to use get timeline. So that'll get the tweets of these specific people. And then and you could do one person, or in this case we have a large list of them, and call BG reporters here, and then we're going to set the n to 500. And what that'll do, it's a low number, but we'll actually, I think it gets 500 from each of them. So it actually is more, it's like 5,000 if there's 10 of these people. So let's go ahead and run that. And then we're going to call the tweet data BG tweets. And that might take a moment to run. So now here's while that's going, I want to show you basically this chunk here is pretty much the same as that big chunk above, but there is one kind of key, there's two kind of key differences. So yeah, and I say here, note in the code below, notice that we're using mention screen name. So above, we instead of mentions, we used retweet screen name. So let me go back up here. So we use the screen name of the person and then the screen name of the person they retweeted, and put those into our network. And what we changed here is we change that to this. Okay, so we start with the screen name of the person who tweeted, but then we instead of doing retweet screen name, we got mention screen name. So this is the a person that they mentioned, that they put their name, their screen name in their tweet. And then we also have the text, because we want to keep the text of the tweet as well. So that's one excuse me, that's one big difference, where this is going to be a mentions network. So notice we call it the Billings Gazette Mentions Network instead of a retweet network. So it's just another way that people are linked on Twitter. But then the other, so it says two, also notice in the first paragraph this line appears with filter. So that's this line here. And so what we're doing is, these reporters might mention another reporter who works at the Gazette, but they also might mention other people as well who don't, who are not in our list. And what I would like to do is create a network only of these people. Let's not have any outsiders in it at all. So we've already got tweets by these people, and so what this line does is it limits the mentions that we're looking at. It says mention screen name in BG reporters. So we're limiting it so it doesn't go to people outside of this small group of reporters. And so this whole line here is totally new. If we look above, it's, look back here at the previous one, notice it has the network, and then it has get edges and get graph, and it doesn't have that filter line. And I think that's important. I think this is maybe a better way to do this. Where am I? Here, where we just limit our network only to people in our list. So basically that's what that does, and I think everything else is pretty much the same. And what I did is I just kind of copied and pasted the above thing, but just changed all of the variable names to BG mentions instead of what was it, BL tweets. But like all the commands and stuff are pretty much the same. So let's go ahead and run that. And again, this will create the network diagram here, and I have the title Billings Gazette Reporters Twitter Mentions Network. And so notice how much nicer this looks. It's not this big, huge, disconnected graph, Instead, it's only the people that we're interested in and their mentions of the other people in the list. And so we can see it looks like it's this Rob Rogers is one of the reporters, and he looks like he's the biggest Twitter user. He's mentioning and being mentioned by others the most, because you can see it because he's got the biggest circle. And we can hover over the line to see what was mentioned. And so you can see there, there's that Chuck Tingle again. I wonder if he's a reporter. And you can see in every one of these tweets, there should be, so like that says @BG Mayor, so there should be a mention of one of the other reporters. Oh, so that's interesting. That doesn't have one. I don't understand that, but okay, so we can, and it's going to ask us to get a couple of statistics. So let's, it says above we got V count, E count, and edge density. Here, let's get the diameter length of the network, and it says you can go back and look at how you got it. But what we're going to do is we're going to start with BG mentions network. Oops. There we go. And then we can get the diameter, and I think the command is get underscored, yeah, diameter. And then let's actually look at that first. Okay, so it says from, wow, it's only, the length is only 3. So from BG Core to BG M Hoffman to BG Sue Alp. So it's a, that means it's a pretty tightly packed network. It's not very, if the diameter's small, that means most of the people are talking to one another. And we can get the length of it. This is what I wanted you to do, is to get the length. So get diameter and then get the length of that diameter, which should be 3. Yeah. So that means it's, again, it's a pretty tightly packed network. Actually, just for curiosity, I think I will get the density, and I bet the density is going to be a lot larger. And then it's edge density, and let's just see what it is. So remember, above it was 0.002, and here it's 4.5, right? So it's much higher density, and that makes sense just by looking at it. You can see that most of these people are connected to one another. Okay, but that wasn't part of the requirement. So now it says, finally, starting with BG mentions nodes, you select to only look at the name and degree of the reporter. So BG mentions nodes. So these are the nodes are the names of the reporters, and then you select to only look at the name and the degree of the reporter. So it must be name and then degree. And again, we have that because we set that up here. So there's the name was part of it when we did this this part here when we got the nodes, and then the degree we set here. Yeah, so in this part here we got the name. We already had the name from this. Sorry, it's from this one here. That's when we created the nodes, and then we added stuff to it here, and we got the degree with this command, degree of the BG mentions network. So that's why we have that. And so it says select the name and degree and then make a data table. So we're going to do data table like that. So we can see who has the most and least connections. So we've got this. Now it's in alphabetical order here, but if we click on this, so that will sort it. And we want to click on it again, so it'll sort it in descending order. And so just like we thought, this Rob Rogers, it has the highest degree. So he's the most, it means he's the most prolific, Twitter user probably, or at least mentioner in the group. And then you can see, if we click the other way, it's sorted. So this BG Mayer is the least, but even still has a lot, 44. Okay, so now I want to show you one last way to do this. So when we created this list above, let's go back up to our initial Billings Gazette list. It was a little tedious, I had to go back and look it up, type them all in here, or at least copy and paste them into here. And it's possible to make typos and stuff. It's a little bit of a pain to do it. So I'm going to show you an easier way to do that, and it's using something called a Twitter list. And what people will do, it's actually pretty easy on Twitter. If you can kind of just point and click and add them to a list. And anybody, you can have a Twitter account and you can create your own list and then use that list to do an analysis. Twitter themselves, the company, has an account called Twitter Gov, like government, and they have lists of politicians. And so, like I say here, U.S. cabinet, which is like the the government, like the the executive branch, White House, and then governors, world leaders. It has the U.S. Senate, which I'll have you do in your assignment, and the U.S. cabinet has 41 members. And so I thought this is how you can do it. So this lists members here is it's an R tweet function, and then you put the name of the list. They call it the slug, which is the name of the list, and then the Twitter account. So it comes from this Twitter gov, and it puts it basically once we run this. So let me show you this. So if I run that line, and then if I type in cabinet, it has see how it has the list of all of those Twitter users. So this different secretary of, oh, I don't know who these people are. Secretary, I think, of State is Pompeo, and you know, let's see. Let's look at some other ones. Education secretary and their names. It has the White House. There's some repetition in here because it'll have the individual secretary, and then maybe it'll have their department as well. So there's some repetition, but that's all right. Treasury secretary, transportation, CIA, etc. It's kind of funny that the CIA has a Twitter account. Okay, so anyway, you get the idea. Excuse me, you don't have to show that, but I just thought I'd show you what that looks like. So now we've got this list of these Twitter users, and then we can use this in a get timeline command. And so we have to do this cabinet. Remember, this is the cabinet, and we only want the screen name, which is these people here. And so we do this cabinet $screen name. And in this case, because this is a larger list, I'm going to get 300 of each. So let's go ahead and run that. And then while that's collecting those tweets, so it's getting the last 300 tweets of each of those cabinet members of the government. And then basically we're going to run the same code as we did in the previous example with this filter command. So we're only looking at and this time we're also going to look at retweets again instead of mentions, but we could look at either. But we're going to make sure that we only look at cabinet members' retweets of other cabinet members. And again, that's what this line here is doing. And then all the rest of it is the same. Just make sure that you have to rename all this stuff. Every time you see this, you have to make sure you put your variable names in correctly. And then it creates the diagram and all that. So let's go back and look. It's still collecting these. Okay, there we go. That only took a couple, what was that, about 2 minutes or so. So let's run this. So this takes those tweets, creates a graph, creates the nodes, adds some columns to the nodes here, creates the edges here, adds the title to the edges so we can hover over it and see the tweet, and then creates the diagram, and then names it U.S. Cabinet Officials Retweet Network. So there it is. And again, we can kind of look and see who's kind of the most important. So there's actually a Twitter account for the whole cabinet, and so obviously that's big. I'm not sure who that is. I guess Small Business Administration, maybe SBA. That's White House. Not sure. Sunny. I'm not sure who that is. Maybe the Agriculture Secretary. Treasury, and then Mnuchin, I think, is the name of that's the Treasury Secretary. So they're connected. You can kind of see who's who by who they're connected to. So anyway, that's our network of the cabinet officials and what who they're retweeting basically. Now, one of the functions that we used and we looked at with our tweet is to or not our tweet, with iGraph, is to get a community. So we can kind of look at this and we can see certain people kind of retweet each other, and so we can figure out what the kind of little communities, kind of little friends, I guess, among the government are. And that's what this is doing. Remember this membership, infomap.community, etc. And then, excuse me, and then what we can do is call that group, and then by creating a new column in the nodes called group, it will automatically appear in our network. And so basically that's what that is doing. What is that there? I don't know. But so this is showing, so there you can kind of see how many groups. Oh, wow. So there's only actually 2 groups in this. So we have this yellow. Let's see if we can figure out kind of what they are. The yellow one is the White House, cabinet. I don't know. It seems like that's the dominant one. And then the blue one, State Department, Vice President, Trade Rep. Huh. It looks to me like it's kind of foreign policy-ish. Secretary of Defense, Department of Homeland Security. Nielsen is the Secretary of Homeland Security. Not sure who some of those people are, but Vice President. It's interesting that the Vice President kind of has a separate community, in a sense, from the White House. But that's Treasury, so it's not quite just foreign policy, but it's kind of certain people kind of seem to be with the Vice President, and other ones, the yellow ones, seem to be more with the President, I guess, because that's White House. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that it was only 2. So anyway, so that's it. Now, when you do the original assignment, I want you to get 200 tweets. I want it to be small because there's a lot more senators than there are cabinet members. And so basically do this same thing above, but with senators. All right. See you next video.